Scrum. Let's talk about Scrum. Let's talk about Scrum for hardware in this case. Looking at Scrum, the most popular, the most used way, the most used framework to be agile, to deliver products in an agile way, how that compares to how that fits into the lean plan, do, check, act cycle. Because essentially it's the same. A few different meetings, different events in it, but it's essentially the same. So plan, do, check, act, just like the lean cycle, the Scrum cycle, which is called the sprint, and which is really short. 2 weeks is typical. Sometimes 1, sometimes 4, but 2 weeks is typical to go through all the steps of planning, delivering, checking, and then implementing the changes that are necessary. What are the events in Scrum? Planning in Scrum is called sprint planning. It plans for the next 2 weeks. So sprint planning, where the whole team, everybody who works together to go through that plan, do, check, act cycle, sits down and says, what are we going to do? What activities are necessary? And the input for those activities, all the activities that are necessary to deliver a full product, are listed on the product backlog. A long list, well, as long as necessary, with every activity to get that final product out of the door. If we take a marker, whiteboard marker as a product, then delivering the cap is a product, delivering that ink, the container, the whole thing, the label, etc. All kinds of deliverables that need to be produced. So product backlog goes into sprint planning, and team decides what's most important to do next. And for those pieces of work, which should fit in the 2 weeks that they have at their disposal, for those pieces of work, detail gets written down. So if producing the cap is selected as, we're going to do this in the next sprint, then the work to do the CAD design, the work to 3D print it, work to do the quality inspection, work to check in with supply chain that plastics are available, writing manufacturing steps, everything to basically make it a real cap. Well, as real as you can push it in 2 weeks, because a final cap is not 3D printed. A final cap might first be 3D printed, in the next sprint get some stamps produced for it, soft materials, in a third sprint, etc., etc. So it's not everything is a full product after one sprint, but what comes out of it is real. We'll come back to that. So work gets picked up, sprint planning produces the steps, the activities, the sprint backlog, and then the work starts, the do starts, engineering starts. And that work, that delivery work, continues for 2 weeks with a daily check-in that things are going according to plan. That there's not somebody sitting idle or somebody stuck on a nasty CAD design problem or waiting for a supplier to come in with materials. And every day, briefly, 10-15 minutes check-in with the whole team, calling it a daily Scrum. Every day, a stand-up to keep rolling forward as a team. So that at near the end of the 2 weeks, that product increment, in whatever shape or form, but there's a true product increment ready. And that increment is the input for the check. In Scrum, that check falls apart into 2 separate meetings. and it's actually check and act is in one single event. Inspecting, checking that print cap is done in sprint review. All the people who worked on the parts are there, stakeholders are there, maybe some people who are not yet super active. Somebody from manufacturing comes in and they don't really have a role in delivery, but it's good to keep them informed that, hey, we're going to produce those kind of caps. And maybe he looks at the thing and goes like, gee, that's really super thin material, isn't it? Can supply chain deliver that? And oh yeah, it's a supply chain, we have that. And he says, but our machines don't handle that easy. We need significant running time, and hey, there is feedback on a product increment, and that's what we're looking for. You don't want to end up with a cap after a number of months of development of that marker, ending up at manufacturing, and then having a manufacturing engineer say, that's too thin. Because then we're way down the line, and it's going to be very expensive to get fixed. But 2 weeks worth of work and manufacturing giving negative feedback, now we can do something. Doing something, well, all works, it's in the product backlog. So the output, the results of the sprint backlog, of the sprint review go on the product backlog. That is where the work gets collected, and it's maybe the next sprint where that material that's too thin gets picked up. So sprint review, inspecting what got produced and taking the feedback, all necessary people, all stakeholders, all people from the whole value chain are there to look at it every 2 weeks. The second Check Act meeting is the Sprint Retrospective. This is where essentially that delivery team, with all the people in it, sit down and say, so what happened? What can we learn? What went well? What could be up for improvement? That cap that got feedback in the review, team might look at it and go like, hey, that wasn't clever. How can we do that better next time? Can we make an additional step to the moment that we have just a first sketch, a first outline in the CAD tool, give the manufacturing people a quick call and see if they got time to look at it. Inspecting so that things go better. This is essentially a Kaizen event if you want to use the lean language. So Kaizen event where the output gets reflected in all the different activities, and to remind the team of the improvement activity, there are teams who put that improvement at the top of the backlog. Most teams pick only one improvement. Don't boil the ocean with improvements in 2 weeks. That's just not feasible, not possible. Then with retrospective done, ready for the next 2 weeks, for the next sprint, the next sprint planning. It's a continuous cycle, on and on and on and on. There's no gap in between. This is what basically happens in every sprint in Scrum, translated to an industrial setting, Scrum for hardware.